everything that I've seen to date is concerning to me because it's exculpatory. And I need to clarify this. When all of the records are produced and the dust settles and I have time to review it, I reserve the right to say, no, now I'm seeing everything. Here's what I'm seeing. Because of the piecemealing of the data, because of the missing data, because of data that I'm reviewing that is incredibly inaccurate, everything that is missing is absolutely in the benefit of the defense right now.
Are you and Balance exchanging emails about these records?
No, ma'am. Not that I remember.
How did you get them to me?
We were co-located. At the time, Detective Balance was at the Moscow Police Department about 30 feet down the hallway.
Are the two of you exchanging text messaging during this time?
I do not remember if you texted during that time.
I may have a record that would refresh your memory. I'm certainly not seeking to have these admitted, but I'd like to hand him some records to refresh your memory.
So not only do I look for the most current updates for my audience, but I also try to find subjects that people have questions about. And one thing that people are continuously bringing up and sometimes getting confused is the difference between your cell phone data and your metadata and the two different ways that they tracked Bryan Kohberger.
So at this moment in the case against Bryan Kohberger, his defense team is motioning for a Franks hearing. And just so everybody knows what that is, Bryan Kohberger's defense team is essentially saying that there was either prosecutorial, investigative, or officer misconduct involved in the probable cause, which was used to search and ultimately arrest Bryan Kohberger, the evidence that was presented to the original magistrate, Judge Megan Marshall. We now have seen the oral arguments that will be given to the judge to see if a Franks hearing will be granted. And out of all the possible arguments, I really want to focus in on one of the two expert witnesses that the defense is citing here, whose name is Cy. Now, we've heard Cy on the stand in pretrial hearings talking about how the information that he's reviewed was exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger. So when we see his name listed in the Franks hearings, we're assuming that he's going to be talking about probable cause and the AT&T search warrants. If these Franks hearings are granted or these oral arguments are made public, we might finally find out why one of the FBI agents who was helping build the case against Bryan Kohberger, whose name is Nick Balance, leaked his text messages to defense attorney Ann Taylor for Bryan Kohberger.
Why did FBI agent Nick Balance leak his text messages to Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger's defense attorney?
So this video is going to begin with talking about the metadata and smartphone evidence, and then the GPS, and then we're going to get to the FBI leaked text messages. So I wanted to find a way that I could show my viewers a simplistic way to understand how they're tracking Bryan Kohberger's phone and how they are questioning this evidence. So what I'm doing is playing you a soundbite from one of my members' lives where my good friend Twizz explains this in words we can all understand. Let's have a listen.
I really don't know what questions to ask. I'll be honest, I kind of just, those were
I'm working on something on my side. So basically, this would be the coverage area, one sector of the tower, right? And what you do with casting is with the timing, they can come out with a distance away from the tower. So with the, trying to find my mouse, with the timing, they can find out how far away from the tower you are. And then at some point, the tower will tell you at least fairly accurately, the degree from the tower that it goes away from. So you'll know the angle from the tower and then the distance from the tower. And that's how they come up with an area of where the phone would be. If that makes sense.
Well, I guess the part that I don't get is like in my head when I hear that, it's like hearing like a math equation and not knowing what one of the numbers are by not knowing. I don't understand how one tower does it, but when you say they have a starting point, like if they know the starting point, that's how they figure it out?
Yeah, the starting point is the tower.
Oh.
So what it does is it measures how long it takes for the signal to get from the tower to your phone and back again. So if it takes 2 seconds, they divide it by half, which would be 1 second, and then they know based on the speed of light, the signal is like however distance it can travel in 1 second from the tower.
All right, so that shows the distance.
Right.
And how they show the direction.
That I don't know how the tower does it. I just know that it does do it.
I mean, I just speculate.
So like if it was just the time, like if they just had the timing, they'd come up with like something like this. They would know the phone is like this far away from the tower. And then when they get the direction read from the tower, they know which area it would be on. But I can show some examples of why the timing is so important.
Thank you.
And you can tell I can find this pretty fast because I do this often. But this is the tower in Blaine. Right? So you got Moscow up here, and then you travel down I-95 down this way. But the only way they could pinpoint exactly where he is on that road is through the timing. Otherwise, it just shows this coverage area. He could be up here, he could be down there on the road, and he would never know. But with the timing and the angle that the signal goes out from the tower, they can track phones on the roads. And there is an interesting video with Cy, because he says that it's actually easier to track people on these rural roads because there's less turns and different, like less ways people can go, you know? But I mean, essentially, if all they can see is the tower that he's connecting to, Bryan could have been way down here and connected to that tower. This tower covers south of Moscow on I-95 near Blaine, north of Genesee, but you could also be way the hell down here and they would never know based off of the records that they had when they wrote the PCA to arrest him.
Does Cy know where he is before 448, or is that what he has claimed on the stand?
Well, he wouldn't be able to track his phone before 448, most likely, because he would be out of cellular range. His phone doesn't have service before then.
Wow, it's interesting.
So I hope at least the explanation I just played you gives some basic understanding as to how cell phone towers were used to track Bryan Kohberger and gain probable cause to arrest him. However, I want to also explain another type of data that is used to track Bryan Kohberger, and we don't exactly know what's contained within that data, which is the metadata, the satellite tracking of Bryan Kohberger. Ironically enough, when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, allegedly he told law enforcement to look at his GPS metadata. Let's take a listen.
I don't know if you want to read the whole thing or just like the fun part.
Probably the whole thing, if you don't mind.
All right. It says Bryan Kohberger, the man charged with murdering 4 University of Idaho students, initially waived his right to counsel and agreed to speak with law enforcement following his arrest. But then he requested an attorney, according to the public defender representing him in Pennsylvania. Kohberger, 28, was taken into custody just before 2 a.m. last Friday morning at his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. He faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary for the deaths of Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin at a home near campus last November. Kohberger is being held at the Monroe County Correctional Facility until an extradition hearing is scheduled for tomorrow. He's calm. He's fully aware. It's obvious he's very intelligent. He already has a master's. It shouldn't shock anyone that he's intelligent, said Jason Labar, Chief Public Defender of Monroe County, who will represent Kohberger at what is expected to be a brief extradition hearing Tuesday. Kohberger had just completed his first semester as a PhD student studying criminal justice and criminology at Washington State University in Pullman when he was taken into custody. Labar told Law and Crimes and Jeanette Levy that Kohberger spoke with law enforcement for 5 to 15 minutes at the Pennsylvania State Police Barracks following his arrest early Friday morning. Initially, Kohberger waived his Miranda rights, but then requested an attorney. Labar said Kohberger told him that police asked if he understood what was going on, and he responded by saying something to the effect of, "Yes, I'm certainly aware of what's going on. I'm 10 miles away from this." Then Labar said Kohberger invoked his right to counsel and asked for an attorney. Moscow police said they seized a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra. Labar confirmed Kohberger drove that vehicle. Police had initially asked that month for any information about a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra and said they had registrations for 22,000 vehicles that matched that description. Police executed search warrants at Kohberger's apartment in Pullman and seized several items, and also searched his parents' home in Pennsylvania. Kohberger arrived in Pennsylvania in mid-December, Labar said. His father flew to Washington to make the drive back with his son, and what Labar said was a trip planned before the start of the school year, which his mom said that he bought the ticket before Bryan even got to Pullman, if anyone was wondering. Labar said father and son left Pullman sometime between December 13th and December 16th in an effort to beat the incoming snowstorm. Bryan isn't denying he was in Pullman through mid-December, Labar said. He also said he assumes law enforcement has his GPS data available through his mobile phone. Daniel, if you're still here, this came out January 2nd, 2023, right after he was arrested. I wonder why he'd be saying they have his GPS data if he's scared that it's going to show him in Moscow.
Wow.
Kohberger's family released a statement over the weekend through Labar. First and foremost, we care deeply for the 4 families who have lost their precious children. There are no words that can adequately express the sadness we feel, and we pray each day for them, the statement read. We will continue to let the legal process unfold, and as a family, we will love and support our son and brother. We have fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek the truth and promote his presumption of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions. Daniel. Kohberger's parents cannot afford a lawyer for him, so he will have to have a public defender in Idaho, Labar said. Which, lucky for him, Ann Taylor's a gangster. Little is known about Kohberger, but former classmates have come forward to share their recollections of him. They requested anonymity after law enforcement requested they not speak publicly about Kohberger. A man who attended DeSales University in Pennsylvania with Kohberger during their undergraduate studies recalled a tall, awkward student who often spoke over professors in a superior manner. Words can't really describe my shock. It's pretty surreal, the man said. He added that he noticed a slight change in Kohberger's appearance from their undergraduate years. He definitely looks sort of gaunt and emaciated at this point, a little older, the man said. The former classmate described how he remembered Kohberger in classes. He's definitely an awkward figure, very tall, skinny, the former student said. He added that the desks at DeSales were somewhat small, so Kohberger, who stands around 6 feet tall, barely fit in the small desk, so he viewed Kohberger as an outcast because he was clearly someone who was very interested in the criminal justice in a deep way, but didn't take part in the extracurricular activities surrounding the major, such as Criminal Justice Club and a criminal justice conference many of the other students attended. While Kohberger willingly spoke in class, he didn't socialize with the other students in the major outside of class. He's definitely articulate, but stuck in minor details and pointing out flaws in what the professor was saying. Sometimes he made good points. There are times people were like, "Can you please shut up so we can move on?" It's not really relevant, the former classmate recalled. The DeSales graduate said he was in 2 classes with Kohberger, one about criminal theory taught by Michelle Bolger, PhD, and a second taught by Catherine Ramsland, PhD. What up, Ramsland? That focused on serial killers. The DeSales alumnus said in Bolger's class, Kohberger would sometimes talk over the professor. Ramsland told Law and Crime over the weekend that she is not making statements to the media at this time. The former student said that the class on serial killers focuses on the psychology and the anatomy of the brain, that the material was presented professionally and deftly. Bolger was not responded to in an email seeking or has not responded to an email seeking comment. Another former DeSales student said she didn't know Kohberger well, but remembered him in the master's program being quiet and a bit strange. The woman added, he kept to himself and had a deadpan look in his eyes if you looked at him. Meanwhile, an undergraduate student at Washington State University recalled taking a class last semester where Bryan Kohberger was a teaching assistant. She recalled Kohberger only being in class 3 or 4 times during the semester, and her professor, John Snyder, telling class Kohberger was a harsh grader. For that reason, she said she never approached him. She recalled Snyder telling Kohberger to be nice when grading and joking that he could be hard on students' papers, but not only girls, which is weird.
Yeah, that's
A lot of the, well, I'm not going to say a lot because we've only heard a few of them, but the girls said that he was a harsh grader towards girls, but the guys haven't said that. Everyone has said he's a harsh grader. Let's see. He always got straight to the point when reviewing my papers. Pretty blunt, the student said. Professor Snyder has not responded to an email seeking comment. Kohberger's extradition hearing will be held Tuesday afternoon in Monroe County at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. He could be returned to Idaho shortly after. Labar confirmed that Kohberger is a strict vegan and that the Monroe County Correctional Facility is making accommodations for his diet. However, Labar said he is most concerned about Kohberger's rights as a criminal defendant. I do not want Bryan to be tried in the court of public opinion. Well, that didn't work out very well, Labar said. Let's wait until the facts come out. Let's not assume anything. It's so important you don't jump to conclusions. Daniel.
Well,
So when it comes to the leaked FBI text messages, Ann Taylor brought those up when she was talking about probable cause and tracking Bryan Kohberger's cell phone. So now that we've learned about that, let's get right into the story.
why did FBI agent Nick Valance leak his text messages to Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger's defense attorney? So Nick Valance was part of the team that investigated Bryan Kohberger. He helped track Bryan Kohberger's phone. He helped build the case for probable cause so that Bryan Kohberger could be arrested and searched. In a preliminary hearing on May 30th, Ann Taylor was cross-examining Corporal Payne regarding how he collected the probable cause evidence, other words, how he tracked Bryan Kohberger's phone. Now, Brett Payne was really unable to explain how he created these documents, these maps, and these tracking CAS reports. So oftentimes he would reference that he relied on people within his sphere with more experience and more education than him. And essentially what he was referencing is there were FBI agents working within their office. So during this testimony, he drops the name of FBI Special Agent Nick Valance. Yet repeatedly, he was asked for the work product that led up to tracking Bryan Kohberger. And after failing to explain where that work was or where it could be found, Ann Taylor presented in front of him a transcript of text messages received from FBI agent Nick Valance.
and you take a look at them and you start writing your warrant. Is that right?
The records were provided to FBI Special Agent Valance, who began deciphering them. I'm not an expert in cell phone records.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you.
So, no, ma'am, I'm not. So, he was the one who was conveying that information to me so I could understand what it was.
So do you get the records and then get them to him somehow?
Yes, ma'am.
The records do they go directly to Valance?
I do not recall what the distribution was on the return itself. I do not recall that.
Are you and Valance exchanging emails about these records?
No, ma'am. Not that I remember.
How did you get them to them?
We were co-located. At the time, Detective Valance was at the Moscow Police Department about 30 feet down the hallway.
Are the two of you exchanging text messaging during this time?
I do not remember if you texted during that time.
I may have a record that would refresh your memory. I'm certainly not seeking to have these admitted, but I'd like to hand him some records to see if we can refresh his. Do you recognize what's been placed in front of you?
No, ma'am, I do not.
So FBI agent Nick Balance was part of a group text message exchange when they were trying to track down Bryan. Here's the thing. How could Ann Taylor get her hands on this? FBI agent was investigating Bryan Kohberger. He was building a case against Bryan Kohberger. Why would he voluntarily give his text messages to the defense attorney in this case? I mean, I'm not a lawyer or a legal professional, but I Googled it. And they said in order to obtain an FBI agent's personal text messages, you would need extremely good reason and a subpoena. You would have to obtain a warrant to get the personal messages of an FBI agent. So why would he just voluntarily hand them over? What in them? So it's not just that he would voluntarily hand them over. It's why did he think they were important to the defense? After Payne left the stand, we saw Cy Ray come on. And essentially what Cy Ray was saying is his analysis of the same information puts Bryan Kohberger somewhere else, away from the scene of the crime. In fact, what he saw that was provided to him was exculpatory to Bryan, was his words.
Everything that I've seen to date is concerning to me because it's exculpatory. It is absolutely in the benefit of the defense right now. There's other reports that I believe are missing that I can't tell you are in the benefit of Mr. Kohberger or in the benefit of the state.
Now let's just listen in really quickly on what expert witness Cy Ray had to say regarding AT&T search warrants, which might explain why the defense is questioning the probable cause and one of the reasons they're producing oral arguments for this Franks hearing.
This comes from Ms. Potts.
Well, okay, I guess there's no probable cause here because you couldn't find other connection to forensic evidence when there are other things in the affidavit that were affidavits at that point that could explain that, including the use of covering clothing and covering gloves and all that could be put into a bag real quick on the way out that was in one of the affidavits. I guess, and I don't intend to argue with you about it. I understand your other arguments, but when you get to once they have the actual DNA, evidentiary DNA, it seems to me that it's an uphill battle to say there's not probable cause at that point.
Well, Your Honor should never get to that question, but I'm going to answer it for you. But you should never get to that question because you should have already found that AT&T 1 and AT&T 2 were terrible. And there's no probable cause for those. And they just build on each other. So,
well, okay, I guess there's no probable cause here.
Why would he be saying AT&T warrant 1 and AT&T warrant 2 are building each other off each other? Is she saying he illegally obtained them? Just don't forget, one of the things that Cy Ray testified to, other than Bryan's location, was the unusual requests for warrants from AT&T. And that's where Cy Ray came in.
in your experience with working with AT&T records, is it common or uncommon to have two warrants, one that relies on the content of the first in the same day?
It's not uncommon to see a small time period that produces results that would increase the desire, the need for a bigger time period of records. Seeing that entire process happen twice in the same day is extremely rare. In looking at what's been produced, probably 2 or 3% is missing, but it's not the amount of data or the time of the data, it's the locations of the data. Some of the most significant locations in this case we're missing some data.
Those significant locations, have they been depicted or captured on the cast draft report?
They have.
So if they're questioning the validity of these warrants, I have a feeling it's expert witness Cy Ray that's going to be contradicting those. So sometimes we think that these details mean nothing, but for me, when I'm trying to paint an accurate portrayal of the crime scene, it really helps to have these details straight. So if you made it this far into this video, I just really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what I had to say. Why did the FBI agent Nick Valance leak his text messages to Ann Taylor? Drop it in the chat below. I'd love to know your thoughts, and please consider subscribing to my channel. I try to put out content like this daily, and I would love for you to be part of my true crime community. And with that said, I hope you have a great day.